Welcome back, everybody, to That's the Ticket. Ben, 1992, January
Yeah.
19th, the Knickerbocker Arena in Albany, New York. That was the ticket. Tell me what happened on that night.
Well, as we know, that was a lot of things happened that night, but the big one everyone kind of remembers is the tear in the eye. The Nature Boy comes. That's what everyone kind of remembers of history. Flair comes to WWF and conquers it and finally wins the big one. And there's lots of other ones that we'll get to, but that's the deal. That's
Yeah.
the ticket on this one. So, what as we started doing this, we were picking great historical matches, but also ones that we have tick. I have a ticket of as kind of the
Yeah.
in and to exploit tickets a little bit, and further them. What makes this one special in the ticket world is also there's only two total graded by PSA, which is
Oh, really?
astonishing, really.
Give an idea of
And
what,
both,
what you say there's only two. What would a general number be for a big event?
well,
Like say last time when we did the Sheik and Hogan, there's lots of those ticket stubs floating around. There's lots of WrestleMania tickets floating around. Um, what would be an
I think
average number, do you think?
Well, I think there's a lot of things involved here. So, WrestleManias and a lot of the older ones were actually the big one was MSG. And
Right.
MSG held a lot more people. And a lot of people in those areas were avid fans and they would go and they would collect. They literally collect and kept their tickets and programs, which is so strange because there was so much going on there. It was history and they could do it every time, like Yankee Stadium almost, kind of for kind of what I gather. But this one obviously wasn't at MSG, and there was only 17,000 total people there. It seems like a lot, but when it's people that don't typically collect a lot, I mean, it's in New York, but it's a strange thing. You know, uh, it's different. Now there are more of them out there, obviously, that aren't PSA graded. I actually have two others
Do you? Cool.
that I haven't had graded, but it's still the fact that there's only two in the entire pop uh, right now is pretty small because tickets have gone for quite a bit lately. So
Right. Now, for our audience that don't remember sort of what was going on in the wrestling world at that time, in the obviously the late 80s, Hulk Hogan was in the WWF, and Ric Flair was the man in NWA. And what happened was just prior to this Royal Rumble, the unthinkable happened, and Ric Flair left that NWA and came over to the WWF. And I don't know if you recall, but for we wrestling fans back then, when there was no internet, one of the biggest questions, and you'd see this on the cover of Pro Wrestling Illustrated, you'd see the Hogan and Flair face to face, and it would be, what if? What would ever happen if the greatest from the NWA and the greatest from the WWF was to get together? And this was, and we'll talk about in a minute how that great match never happened at the subsequent WrestleMania, but Flair comes to WWF and enters the Royal Rumble at number three and wins it and wins the title, which is normally not something that happens at a Royal Rumble. Normally, the title was declared vacant after the Andre the Giant business, and then the next thing you know, here comes Flair into the Royal Rumble, and he wins it. For me, this is it's hard to say, but this is probably my all-time favorite moment in wrestling ever. It's hard for me to, like I think about Michaels and Taker at WrestleMania 25. I think about Savage and Steamboat at WrestleMania 3, but I was always a Flair guy. So when Flair finally came over to the WWF and wins the Royal Rumble, it was like, yeah, there it is. Now, I just mentioned that the big payoff would have been the Hogan Flair match, and we all expected that to happen at the WrestleMania that followed, and for whatever reason, it didn't. And there's never really been a straight answer. And historians have asked, why did we not get that Hogan Flair match? We did in WCW for Halloween Havoc years later, but we didn't get that one-on-one. But we did see Flair come in, and it was just a short time. He only came into the WWF for like a couple of years. He won the title twice, and at the subsequent WrestleMania, he dropped the belt to Savage. But on this night, he came in third, and for me, it was, like I say, probably my favorite moment in wrestling ever. People talk
yeah,
about, and I read recently about this last Royal Rumble that we just had. And some people said that it was probably the most star-studded Royal Rumble in history. I'm like, hang on, wait a minute. Let's talk about the
wow,
1992 Royal Rumble. Now, I'm just going to mention a bunch of names here that were in that Royal Rumble, right? And this is half of the participants. So in that Royal Rumble 1992 in Albany, New York, we had Ted DiBiase, we had Ric Flair, who came in third and won it. We had Shawn Michaels, we had Tito Santana, we had the Texas Tornado, who was Kerry Von Erich, we had Greg Valentine, we had Roddy Piper, we had Dave Roberts, we had Jimmy Snuka, we had The Undertaker, we had Randy Savage, we had Hulk Hogan, we had Sergeant Slaughter, we had Sid Justice. Now, my friend, these guys are all Hall of Famers. Um,
Yeah.
I don't think there's ever been a Royal Rumble that's even close insofar as the caliber of participants. Like it's just a who's who of wrestling talent. And Flair winning it was a big deal for me. But the two things, like you said earlier, the with the tear in my eye promo after the fact, I thought was one of the best promos I can ever remember. Him and Heenan and Perfect. But what about Bobby Heenan himself throughout the entire thing? In my
Yeah.
opinion,
Commenting the whole.
that commentary is the greatest wrestling commentary I have ever heard. Him and Gorilla, like I love Gorilla and
Oh
Bobby.
yeah, and Gorilla was setting it up right in the beginning, saying
Teeing it
this
up
is
in
it.
every
There's
moment.
no
Be
one's
fair,
ever
beef.
won,
No, yeah,
the first five, and set it up perfectly. And we were all dumb back then. We're like, it's kind of real, and he's right. You still got away with that. Now we'd say, well, for sure he's going to win. It's foreshadowing, but
yeah.
yeah,
Well, the
it
whole be fair to Flair, remember?
yeah. No, it was quite the event, and like you said, the build up with the whole thing was strange. And when we talk about why not Hogan, Flair, some of the in WrestleMania 8, some of the theories were, this was not obviously Flair's first WWF match. That's what everyone wants to say. It's his debut. They had a lot of Hogan and Flair actually had a lot of matches prior
They
to
had house
this, and
shows.
even in '91, and a lot of it was people. The naysayers now say Vince shouldn't have done that because it kind of watered it down, and word got out, and it wasn't as big. But right now in this time, I mean, wrestling was a little lull. I mean, it was at its height at WrestleMania 3, and then so Vince was just trying to sell tickets and also to see kind of how they would work together and how it would be taken. And that's the big reason, I think. I think it's two things. It's money. It's kind of it was already done. Um, and then you had Sid coming and the Undertaker. I mean, you had some big guys that Vince also wanted to include. They were the future. And the Undertaker, but he could still include Flair, and I'm sure that was the contract. Flair, you come over. I'm assuming I haven't seen the contract, but
Put the
we're going
title
to
on.
give you the belt. And so what does he do? Undertaker beats Hogan at Survivor Series, but Flair basically gives him a chair and pile drives him. So Flair made Hogan lose the belt, starts the rivalry. Then in that Texas Tuesday match is where Hogan gets it back from the Undertaker. Flair tries to get in there again, but it backfires, and Hogan beats the Undertaker. And that's when Tunney took the belt away.
Declared it
So you
vacant.
got a lot of these weird things that happen, and that's why this was up in the air. And this is the first time and the only time that the title still it was for the title. And actually, prior to this really had no bearing other than kind of the old school, Royal Rumble. I guess it used to be called Battle Royale, back in the day in the AWA. And it's another thing kind of Vince kind of borrowed,
Yeah,
through Patterson
yeah. Patterson
in
extended
that
the
connection.
concept.
When he came over and Patterson came and he started being the booking agent, he created the Royal Rumble and brought that over. And up to this time, the belt was really not in play.
Yeah.
This is the first time it was in play, and then everything after now, the winner got a shot at WrestleMania. So this was a pretty big deal in the whole Royal Rumble evolution as well, Paul, as you know, and lots of cool stuff, lots of big wrestlers, as you noted, and lots of little backstories. Also, at the Texas Tuesday thing, that's where the Macho Man and Jake the Snake kind of had started a big rivalry and took that to the next level. And that's kind of came into the Royal Rumble a little bit. And that's how Macho Man kind of was exited. And then Sid Justice at the time, I'm kind of talking a lot. I'll let you go here, but
Oh no,
I
no,
guess
no,
that's
no.
what we do.
You're filling
But
in the
Sid
gaps for
Justice was a
people.
baby face at
Yeah.
this time. And they didn't know what to do with him.
It was an
So
interesting
that
run
was
because Flair came in. He started feuding with Piper almost off the top. I remember Piper was sitting with Vince at the announce table, and then Flair came out, and then they had a thing. And then Flair ultimately wins the Royal Rumble. Then Savage beats him, I think it is, or Savage beats him at
Savage.
WrestleMania,
Yeah, Savage
and
beat
then
him at WrestleMania.
Flair gets it back, and then he ultimately
Yeah,
loses it to Bret Hart in Regina, Saskatchewan. Um,
yeah.
you know,
The whole thing
Or
is
Saskatoon, or wherever
strange.
it was. Yeah, and then he was gone, back to NWA, and he subsequently became the world champion there almost immediately once he went back. So it was a very interesting run.
Yep,
It was a short run, but it was very
yep.
historical because, obviously Flair comes to WWE later as an older guy, semi-retired, but that's when he was maybe I would say he was still in his prime there, wouldn't you say? That when he won that Royal Rumble, he was still very much like, it wasn't the early 80s, but it was like, or the sort of mid 80s when he was beating guys like Dusty and Harley and Sting. But here we've got him coming in, winning the Royal Rumble, coming in third, and for anyone that was questioning, well, who is Ric Flair? And is he going to be a force in this business like Hogan? The answer was clearly yes. Let me
Oh, well, look, I mean, it was all the anticipation.
Yeah. Now, let me mention before we sign off a couple other things about that card itself, because last time around I sort of drilled through the entire card, and on a Royal Rumble, obviously the Royal Rumble match itself, which went an hour and some odd minutes, is the biggest. But we also had a few warm-up matches. I'm just going to mention two of them. The first one, it was a dark match, and it was a dude named Chris Walker, who also went by the name of Conan, defeated the Brooklyn Brawler. I have never heard that name before, and I don't recall it from the day. Do you know anything about Chris Walker?
I don't. I was hoping you're going to bring that to the
No,
table.
no, I'm gonna
I,
try and find a
I,
find a picture to put up, but
he obviously didn't work out, and there's a reason
no,
why he's a
yeah,
dark
I
match.
guess. But something else that happened that was a big deal was that Rowdy Piper defeated the Mountie for the IC title. He was a face at that point, and he won his first championship, winning the IC title. Then he subsequently loses it to Bret at the WrestleMania that follows. But that was an interesting sort of warm-up match to the Rumble
Well,
itself.
so there's some history there too. So a lot of these other matches have some good beginning and some drama and some stuff going on because of the money situation. I think there's just a lot of weird stuff happening. But Bret Hart lost the belt to the Mountie on a house show.
Right.
And he said he was
I,
sick with a fever. And
the
the
IC
reason
title.
is because he did not want to lose to Roddy Piper. So
Right.
we all talk about Bret getting screwed and stuff, but he didn't want to, and Hogan being the guy to
No,
call the shots, but Bret did not want to lose that belt, and that's how the mount. But he didn't care losing it to the Mount because
yeah, he's a politicker
historically,
for
big
sure.
deal.
You know,
You know,
he obviously looked out for himself. I mean,
right?
his dad taught him well, um, how to protect his brand and how to make it. Well, we saw Survivor Series, and maybe one day we'll talk about that night. You know, um,
Yeah. The other match, actually, there's a couple others. I don't know which other ones you were going to mention, but um, the new foundation that was an interesting one. Kind
right.
of ties into Bret.
That was Owen and
Owen and
Coco.
well, Bret goes off on his own to do singles, and then they bring in Owen and kind of do this, and that really didn't take off too much, but too long. But that was kind of a new big thing. I think it was their only pay per view. So that kind of shows the evolution of the exodus of the Hart Foundation, and then kind of the growth of Owen, and then of course he goes off on his own as well eventually. Um, the other thing on this one was the Legion of Doom.
All
Now
right.
they were brought in, and everyone loved them. They were the best, and I still think they were the best. As far as I just loved them as a kid. So obviously you got the Rockers and great talent and all these other tag teams, Heart Foundation, but the Legion of Doom was brought in. The Road Warriors were brought in by Vince, and Vince, the polka dot, old Dusty Rhodes polka dot sort of thing, changed their brand, and he did it several times, but this is the first time, of course, and they didn't want Warriors because Ultimate Warrior at the time was the man, right? So one of the before this, but at this time they were having some disputes over money, and the Legion of Doom did not want Hawk did not want to lose the belt. So they had a disqualification. And then, of course, again, house show, they lose to Ted DiBiase in IRS. And then
And
the
those
natural
guys,
disasters.
those
This
guys become
is,
champions, don't they? Yeah,
yeah. So this is
yeah.
kind of the setup. They in moves these guys with this, and they beat Ted DiBiase and IRS in WrestleMania. So you see kind of how all the pegs fit
Are
and
starting to
after the
shape
fact,
together.
and it's just kind of interesting. But that's all. Those are the other matches I kind of had written down and some tidbits of information. So
Nice. Before we sign off, we did this last time as well. Because we're wrestling card guys, we like to sort of tie in sort of what was happening in cards at around the same time. But, in 1992, we didn't have a lot of wrestling cards. There was a WCW set made by Topps, I think in Ireland or some such. But we don't get into WWF cards really until the magazine series that start like in 95, I think it is, and they run through 98. There's a 95 Panini set that comes from Europe as well, but there was nothing really. It was a bit of a downtime in wrestling trading cards in the early 90s. And like you said earlier, in general, just in wrestling in general, we had the big height of Hogan, and then we had the sort of Savage experiment, then we had the Ultimate Warrior experiment, and then they put the belt on Slaughter for a very short time. Hogan got it back, and then this period where Hogan loses the belt and Flair comes in. And it's very interesting because Flair was, they might say a cup of coffee. It was just under a couple of years, but what a couple of years it was, to come in, win this. And then, again, in my mind, for me being a Flair guy, one of the most enjoyable nights in wrestling ever to have him come in and win the Royal Rumble the way he did. And the promo afterwards, the Heenan commentary throughout. It's just, like I say, to this day, I'm waiting for another one.
yeah, well, one thing I forgot to mention, which is interesting, so I'm going to kind of bring it around what you just said about no cards. Well, that's like you said, another indication on the little lull that the WWF had, and I'm sure Vince kind of brought in everything as a businessman would. He's not going to go crazy in merchandise or cards. But one interesting thing that is Hogan was kind of losing some steam,
Yeah.
and
Oh, it had been
if you read
7 years or
about
whatever.
if you read about this Royal Rumble, and it's you got to dig down the rabbit hole, and you can't see it. And this ties into Tony and your and I conversation before. Even the tapes that they gave out were dubbed over.
Right.
The crowd actually cheered when Sid uh, took Hogan,
When he
and
pulled
they
out.
were cheering for. Yes, they were cheering for Sid, and so Sid had a lot of babyface fans, and they made him ultimately a heel, and Hogan faced him. But there was a shift here, and with the fan base with Hogan, and which shows again how genius it was turning him heel 4 years later. But
Yeah.
there was just a lot of weird stuff going on. That's what made this one again so great because you and I were thirsting for something great. They needed something just mind blowing and bringing Flair over after all of these years. I mean, a decade of
Yeah.
wondering what would happen. Here we are.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it
So
was it was it was special.
yeah, it was. So I think we'll wrap it up there. Once again, the 1992 Royal Rumble held in Albany, New York at the Knickerbocker Arena on January 19th, 1992. That was the ticket.
There you go. Thank you.